Transport Minister Omar Alghabra is facing more questions about the ongoing challenges and delays seen across Canadian airports. Scenes like this are what Canadians have faced this summer. Massive lineups, widespread delays and cancellations, lost baggage piling up unclaimed, and airport officials saying the situation is improving. But yesterday alone at Toronto's Pearson Airport, get this, there were 473 flight delays. And Air Canada was second worst in the world for delays, with 55% of its flights running behind, according to FlightAware. So let us bring in right now Ontario Liberal MP Vance Badaway, who is in Welland, Ontario, and the two transport critics for the Conservatives and the NDP, Melissa Lantsman, the Member of Parliament for Thornhill, Ontario. She joins us from Ontario, or from Toronto rather, in Ontario. Taylor Bachrach is the MP for the BC riding of Skeena-Bulkley Valley. He is in Vancouver. Welcome to all of you. So the Minister of Transport declined our request to discuss the delays across the country tonight. But Vance, you are here. Thank you for being here to represent the government. I'm going to start with you. The latest numbers, they show that there have been improvements with the situation overall. But the minister said during the committee today that there are still scenes of people sleeping on floors in airports, unclaimed baggage, as I talked about in the intro, piling up, and long lines in security. The situation has been called a national embarrassment. Toronto Pearson, as I mentioned, the worst in the world for delays. How is this acceptable?
It's not. Quite frankly, it's not acceptable. And hence the reason why the minister has been working very hard with partners, stakeholders across the country, and even internationally with other airports who are experiencing the same problems, to ensure that this doesn't continue to happen. Let's face it, when we see those pictures, or even in the airports ourselves, and we're part of the delays once in a while, it's, as the minister said today, committee, it's just simply unacceptable.
Okay, so Melissa, it's unacceptable. You pressed the minister today on this. I was watching committee. He says it's all hands on deck to fix this, but it's not a quick fix. COVID has posed major problems, as we all know. Other airports in the world have experienced issues, and there are major labor shortages, as we know. So why aren't those explanations sufficient for you and the Conservatives?
Well, so they're not sufficient. We've got a lot of excuses from the government, and frankly, it looked out of touch today based on what Canadians are actually experiencing at airports. The minister couldn't tell committee whether the federal government bears any responsibility to the chaos in the airports. We know there's a lack of capacity with security agents, customs agents, navigation services, pandemic restrictions that are still in place. Those things have contributed to the chaos, and to have a government who doesn't admit it, I think, frankly, is out of touch. This was another session of finger pointing. Airlines, airports, he's blamed passengers in the past, and he's told Canadians that it's a global problem. But like you said, we've been number one at Pearson and number two for Montreal in those top spots, and I think it's creating real reputational damage.
Okay, Taylor, I'm going to get to you in a sec, but Vance, I want to go back to you. The minister, to Melissa's point, he really did just kind of blame COVID. Does the government take any responsibility here when it comes to this, as Melissa said, or is it just a lot of finger pointing going on?
Well, I don't think for a second he was finger pointing. I think what he was trying to explain is what we're actually doing about it, the action that we're taking. And when you run into a situation like this, and it happens in many businesses, and for many of us that have a business background, when we do run into a challenge or issues within a sector, we pivot to ensure that action is being taken.
But does the government take responsibility partially for what is happening?
Well, part of that action that we have to embark on is working with our partners. So we all take responsibility, the partners, the government, and all those that are involved in this particular sector. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're seeing security screening be going up in terms of our percentages within the last month alone. We see flight completions. Only 2% of flights planned for Canada's top 4 airports over the second week of August were canceled. We see on-time departure performance over the second week of August at 86% in comparison to 75%. We see international arrival performance at 2% versus 18% over a few months ago in the month of May. So a lot of the actions that we're taking with the partners are working, but we're not there yet, and we have a lot of work to do heading into the future. Yeah,
definitely not there yet, as you know, anyone who's been through an airport recently will tell you. Taylor, let me get to you now. You know, you called the treatment of passengers today by the government and airlines, really disrespectful. You said that this was a complete embarrassment. So tell me a little bit why you described that. You said that this is shameful. Explain that, and also why you don't think the government has taken enough action, what you think more they should do right now to fix this problem.
Sure. Thanks, Travis. So first of all, the government should have taken more responsibility because, frankly, this was entirely foreseeable. When the government lifted the pandemic travel restrictions, people hadn't been traveling in 2 years. Of course, they're going to want to travel. And they didn't bring on enough staff. They didn't get our airports ready. And now they're scrambling to catch up, and they're caught flat-footed. So the minister didn't take responsibility today to the extent that we needed him to. Now, the issue that I'm focused on is the 18,000 people who have submitted complaints to the Canadian Transportation Agency. These are people whose flights were delayed or canceled. People had to sleep on airport floors. Anyone who's been through one of our major airports and seen the cancellations and delays knows what a horrific situation this is. Now, there are supposed to be regulations in Canada that protect air passengers, this much lauded air passenger protection regulation. But the reality is the big airlines are making a mockery of these rules, and the government refuses to have passengers back. There's this massive backlog, and the airlines are getting away with continued delays and cancellations based on staffing issues, which the CTA has clearly said is not a justification for denying compensation. Well, so we need the government to have people's backs.
Right. But Taylor, the government has increased funding to the CTA. What would you say to that? Because they say that they understand that there's a backlog, and that's why they've increased funding so that they can get through that backlog of complaints. Get your comment on that. And also, what more do you want them to see to do when it comes to airlines for more oversight there?
Sure. So first of all, the government's known this has been happening for some time. The CTA can issue fines. They haven't been. And the maximum fine is $25,000. For a multi-billion-dollar company, that's hardly a deterrent to encourage them to follow the rules. So the government can step in. The minister can issue an order and can issue policy directive under the legislation. He's chosen not to do that. And he's kind of throwing up his hand saying, I guess the process is just going to have to unfold how it unfolds. They need to do more. People are, in these horrendous travel situations, and the government has been missing in action, letting the airlines essentially do whatever they want when it comes to canceling flights or delaying flights. I think that's the key issue here. And there are thousands and thousands of Canadians whose lives have been disrupted by the inaction of this government.
Well, one of the other issues that came up today is the ArriveCan app, and I want to turn to that now. Yesterday, U.S. House Representative Elise Stefanik, she wrote an open letter, and here's her tweet stating that the app has disrupted northern border travel and damaged cross-border tourism and commerce. Vance, what is your response to that, and why is this app still in use?
Well, the ArriveCan app had its purpose with respect to the pandemic and the information that had to be gathered to ensure the safety of Canadians, the health of Canadians. When you look at, and I guess many people have opinions on it, whether it worked or not. Well, when I look at the comparison between Canada and U.S., especially with the per capita death rate, I think it has worked.
You're talking about it in the past sense, though, right? What is it now?
Let me get to the future and the present. So now we're in the present, heading into the future. And when you look at either land or airport, or land border or airport, the ArriveCan app is admittedly needing to have some attention paid to it in terms of some more work being done, because there are glitches. And I, for one, being in the border community, can very much admit to that, because we see the problems that we're having on the land borders here as well. But I have to say this, Trevor, kudos to Minister Alghabra, kudos to Minister Mendicino, Minister Duclos, Minister Boisonneau, and Minister Fortier, who I've been working with one-on-one for the past few months on that very issue. They've been down here. They've been discussing not only with the airports, but also with the land borders, some of those glitches, and the expectation moving into the fall session, as well as past that, is to ensure that those glitches are being dealt with. So not only being dealt with here in Canada, but also the possibility of harmonizing it with the States.
Do you think it is time to drop the ArriveCan requirement? And if so, what is the timeline for that?
Well, I think the decision to drop the ArriveCan requirement is up to the Ministry of Health, based on the science as well as the data that they're accruing over time. We're coming into the fall season, and the COVID is still out there, and it's in some areas, if not most areas, it's starting to rise again. So what we depend on as members of Parliament and members of this committee, quite frankly, is that we deal with factual information, and when we give opinion or we give a recommendation to the minister, which I would expect this committee is going to do, and I would challenge both members that are on this committee that are with us today to do just that. that is to come forward with those recommendations pertinent to the different concerns that they have. And with that said, make sure it's based on fact, science, and therefore, especially with the ArriveCan app, when we're looking at how it's going to be changed, if it's going to be changed, the glitches that are going to be fixed, that in fact is based on the health of this country and the best safety of all Canadians.
Melissa, the minister said today that the ArriveCan app has not created congestion at airports. And there is an argument that this is about health and safety. What do you make of that argument and the fact that the minister said it's not creating a problem?
Well, we later asked officials whether if the mandates were ever dropped in this country, do you still need the ArriveCan app? And the answer wasn't clear. So that suggested that we're going to keep it. Look, border mayors, our partners in the U.S., tourism associations, chambers of commerce, duty-free, frontline agents themselves have all complained about ArriveCan. The 99% compliance rate that the minister talked about, well, the frontline border agents say that it's about 70% because they're helping people comply with that. So I have a few questions. What are they, in terms of when they're helping people fill out the ArriveCan, what are they not doing? There is a lot to look at this issue, but the mandatory use of the ArriveCan app has been criticized by everybody except for the government. And we asked the government today whether they've spoken to anybody who said keep it, and they couldn't answer that question.
Taylor, do you think the app needs to go at this point?
Well, we need the government to address some of the key accessibility issues, particularly at land borders. The border agent shouldn't be acting as IT help desks for people who are struggling with the technology. So the government needs to create accommodations for people who don't have devices that can host the app, for people who are struggling at the borders, so that it's not creating delays and lineups. If they're going to keep this app, they need to ensure that it works for everybody, including people for whom the technology is a barrier. And I think that also means creating paper-based alternatives for people who might not have the app loaded in time for their border crossing. So, those are the things we've been pushing on. I think the bigger issue is these 18,000 air passengers who have submitted complaints and the delays and cancellations that are related to the behavior of the airlines and the government's failure to have people's backs.
I have a feeling that we're going to be back having this conversation. It may be a matter of weeks. Guys, thank you so much. That is time. Melissa, Taylor, Vance, appreciate it. We will talk about it again.
Absolutely.
Thanks Travis.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.